Welcome to this edition of Ultimate Happiness and Success, the break-free monthly program where we bring you the latest knowledge and most helpful solutions from leading experts to help you make the most of your life. Every month we cover a different topic by interviewing a leading expert using the questions our members have at the forefront of their minds to provide you with the most important information that you need to know. Today's topic is overcoming adversity. It's a highly requested topic from our members and something that everyone in this world can benefit from at some point in their lives. Adversity is a part of life, but it doesn't have to drag you down. When adversity happens, how do you react? Do you sink in self-pity or gather the courage to fight the disappointments, the setbacks, failures, and losses? Life is ultimately 10% of what happened and 90% of how you react to it. You may not have been fully responsible for your misery, but it is your responsibility to come out of it. It's a challenge to stay strong. But this is your opportunity to learn more about yourself and grow slowly but steadily. Lance Armstrong is quite possibly the most inspirational sports figure in the world. Just before his 25th birthday, this Olympic athlete learned he had cancer that had spread to his lungs and brain, and he had less than a 50% chance of survival. Despite this devastating news, Armstrong beat the cancer and came back to win the Tour de France, the world's most prestigious cycling event, 4 times. Rick Hansen was still in his teens when he became paralyzed after being thrown from the back of a pickup truck. Rick wheeled 40,000 kilometers around the world to raise awareness of the potential of people with disabilities. In her youth, Oprah Winfrey had to deal with abuse in teenage pregnancy, but she went on to become the most successful talk show host in television history. These individuals are proof positive that adversity, whether it comes as the result of our own mistakes or just plain bad luck, adversity can be overcome. Why did these people succeed and gain strength from adversity, while others seem never to recover from it? My special guest today is a remarkable man who has overcome a lot of adversity in his own life, to say the least. His name is Danish Ahmed. Danish is an extraordinary person who devotes much of his life to helping people live the life of their dreams. Danish is with us not only to share his own experiences with adversity, but also to share his secrets and his ideas on how you can help yourself deal with unexpected obstacles, tragedies, or negative situations that arise in your life. Welcome, Danish. It's such an honor to have you with us today.
Oh, wow, that was inspiring.
That is our goal, to inspire. Danish, are you all ready?
I am.
Okay, I'm going to ask you our first question. Is adversity avoidable?
Well, it can be minimized,
Okay.
and I would assert that that's not the best question to ask.
Okay, that's
the
fair.
best question to ask is, how can I use the adversity that I'm experiencing instead of trying to avoid it?
So not to put words in your mouth, but is it safe to say at some point in your life it's unavoidable, we're going to encounter adversity, and it's how you deal with it?
Exactly. I mean, that's true with anything. It's never what happens to you. It's always how you deal with it.
Let's mention for a minute before we go on, your website is called Ordinary Words. What is that all about?
Well, I started off at a young age in personal development, and I got exposed to lots of different things. And I wanted to get exposed to a wide diversity of things to see all my options. And I realized that there was so much. There was so much variety. There was so much to pick from, so many subjects, from metaphysics to science to spirituality to our pop culture to metaphysics to everything. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to distill it down into something that everyone could understand at a very simple level. Bring it down to earth for the average person. And looking at all those different technologies and methodologies and practices, I realized that the foundation of all of them came down to language, that it came down to words, ordinary words that we use every day, because every day we're talking to ourselves in our mind, and the words we're using to talk to ourselves in our mind is creating the experiences that we have.
That sounds intriguing. You know, before we go on, Danish, do you want to tell us a little bit about the adversity that you've encountered in your life?
Absolutely. Which one? All of them?
Give us your best. Give us your favorites.
I was born in Pakistan in poverty without any electricity or running water as an albino, which meant that I didn't look like anybody else, not my parents either. My parents were very dark-skinned, very fair-skinned, kind of looked like a ghost. In fact, that's what I was called when we immigrated to Canada. When I was 4 years old, we lived on welfare. The albinism also makes me blind, which means I can't see what's in front of me, can't recognize people, can't read regular text, can't drive. And growing up on welfare, I experienced physical abuse, sexual abuse, had thoughts of suicide, was on antidepressants, seeing a psychiatrist 3 times a week.
So you've experienced...
That's a good foundation.
You've experienced the worst of the worst.
Well, it's all relative, right? Or the juiciest of life.
Right. And here you are today, and having met with you personally and talked with you several times, you sound like you're on top of the world. So let's talk about how someone can get there, because we're all dealing with problems, and to each of us, our own problems seem like at times the end of the world or whatever could be the worst. So what was the most critical element for you to help you overcome some of these situations or each of the situations that you've had to deal with?
Well, a lot of it was understanding how my own thoughts worked, and then I think, as we all do, we kind of try to rationalize or logic our way into ourselves into trying to feel a certain way. And like if we think our life is horrible, people will say, well, look at this person in this part of the world whose life is 10 times worse. And, from a logical, intellectual point of view, that may help a little bit. But at the end of the day, I found that the toughest problems weren't relative. They just were huge for me. It didn't matter whether other people had them or had worse problems than I did. Mine felt the worst to me. And right. I also heard Jerry Meadows said that people don't make logical decisions, they make emotional decisions, and they just use logic to justify them.
Absolutely.
And for that reason, I realized that it wasn't logic or rationale or intelligence that was going to get me to shift the way I feel. All it was going to be an emotional choice that did not have reason. And what that emotional choice without reason is faith.
Right. Okay. So the most critical element is understanding and interpreting, or dare I say, controlling your emotions.
Mm.
And the most important emotion that you were just referring to is faith.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's always going to be challenges that don't make intellectual sense to us. They'll seem totally unfair. They'll seem like it's the worst thing in the world to us for all the wrong reasons. And at that point, you can't try to use logic or statistics or relativity to get yourself out. All you can use is a belief that what happened for a greater purpose that was spiritually based. That maybe that you actually chose that experience from a spiritual perspective so that you could learn something and acquire something that will help you in the future.
So if somebody wakes up today on the right side of the bed and they go out, it's a beautiful sunny day and everything seems to be going well, and all of a sudden they're dealt the card they didn't want to get. They're given notice at work, or they lose that big client, or they lose a loved one, or any millions of things could happen to them. What do they need to do? What do they need to remember first and foremost in order to not get off track and effectively and successfully deal with that adverse situation?
So I think your question has several different answers, and so let me start at first. Thing is, I would say they don't need to do anything. It's the first thing to get is that adversity is okay, and that it's okay to feel all those emotions and to feel that you're on the wrong side and you're off course, and that's part of life, and that's okay. It's the attachment to that being wrong that creates sometimes the resistance that keeps us there.
Okay, so the first thing they have to do successfully is accept their emotions and accept the situation.
Yeah, you don't want to shift your emotions too quickly. You want to, because your emotions are there for a reason. If you're feeling depressed, it doesn't mean you should automatically convert that to excitement immediately. you should first look at, some of the triggers that may have caused you to become depressed, or some of the patterns that you have that cause you to become depressed, or what is at the source of that depression. Because what that will do is give you the ability to manage that much more effectively in the future. If you shift right away, even though you can, some technologies, and in some moments you want to, right? Everything is contextually based. Sometimes if you're, 2 minutes before a job interview, you don't want to sit there and analyze your depression, and you want to get yourself out quickly. And so there's technologies to do that. But that doesn't mean you should use those technologies all the time. It's what I love about personal development. It's not a one-shot bullet. There's different technologies and different methodologies that are supposed to be used like tools in different circumstances. So you don't want to be in the habit of always shifting yourself out immediately. That's effective if you're in a situation where you want to, make use of that situation, like a job interview or a very, a special experience out in the town where you don't want to be depressed. There's also times where you need to analyze it and look at it and be with it. And it's in the being with it that you actually release it. Like the Sedona method, which is a personal development technology, is all about, you feeling the emotion first, and that's what releases it. If you try to get rid of it, it will just persist.
Right.
So a part of adversity, I would say, is grieving. Feel the upset and maybe the anger and the frustration that comes with having that adversity. A lot of the times, our emotions aren't about the grief, but they're about the resistance to the grief. It's like it's having that attitude as, why is life so unfair? Well, you're not even looking at the elements that are fair or not fair. You're looking at the philosophy that, and then and the depression becomes so abstract. It becomes something unfixable rather than just accepting that life is fair because it's unfair for everybody. It puts everybody on the same playing field. The lightning that I have in my life exists in other people's lives too, and therefore we're all playing the same relative game. And now let me figure out the pieces of my game and how to improve them and how to make them better, how to learn from them, how to grow from them, and how to make the best of those experiences.
It reminds me of the work, I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Katie. It's called The Work, is her product to help people deal with certain situations. And so you're talking about how to deal with the thoughts, but she has a saying that I thought was very profound in terms of relation to what you were just saying, and that is, there are no new thoughts. All the thoughts are recycled, and those are the initial thoughts. Like when you said the same lightning that's in your life is in everybody else's life, we all think our problems are the worst, when in fact there's millions of people out there that are having the same problematic thoughts or the same situation as you are. We just think it's our own world. And then she takes it a step further on how to deal with that. So you're saying you have to deal with those emotions, and then step one is the emotion. Step two is
and part of that
are the thoughts that you're having about the emotions.
Right, and part of that could be in sharing with people in your life. So sometimes the way to learn from your emotions is to, sometimes we get too caught up in our head and we go in circles. But as soon as we're verbal, and sometimes it could even be in a mirror, but usually with a friend or a nice listening ear, when you verbalize that, again, our society thinks, or has been conditioned to, that it's inappropriate to be self-expressed about negative emotions. But that's why so many people go to psychiatry. It's like, you don't need a psychiatrist. You just need people who know how to listen in your life, because it's beautiful to be self-expressed. That's a part of being human. And we're not, supposed to be, like all happy 100% of the time.
So where do people get off track or fall victim to adversity?
Well, they keep it all inside, so they don't share it, right? They are afraid that other people will judge them for feeling that way or having that adversity, so they won't express to others what they need.
It's ironic, isn't it? That
adversity. Pardon?
Sorry, go ahead.
When we have adversity, in our society, we have enough resources usually to that adversity in an effective way, and it's usually us being too proud to ask for those resources, because they might not be at our disposal, but they're in our community, and we live in a world that's totally interconnected, and we can easily get access to whatever resources we want, and we live in a society that's very open and diverse and accessible. So it's usually people just are just not connecting to people in their community to get the help and the resources and the support that's available to them.
And one of the things that I find very interesting about what you're saying, and of course your answers here are not scripted. They don't sound scripted, and you didn't even know what questions I was going to ask. So it's very good that you're providing that answer, because in my live break-free daily events that we're doing across the country, we talk a lot about emotions, and one of the most powerful emotions that is a problem in many aspects of our life is fear. And you just said something that was very interesting, and that is we're afraid to share our thoughts and feelings. We're afraid to let people know what our emotions are. And there's that darn fear again.
Yeah.
And what are we afraid of? We're afraid of what other people will think of us, how they'll judge us, what they'll say about us.
Exactly.
So fear holds us back. Do we create our own adversity in our lives? I mean, we say some people are just born lucky, and others are just born under a dark cloud. Do you believe that?
Again, it's like it doesn't matter. Whether some people are or whether some people are not. Philosophers have been debating that for years, but it doesn't really change the quality of our life, whether it's one way or the other, because it's so abstract. It's because let's pretend other people are and let's move on, or let's pretend other people are not and let's move on. It doesn't make a difference.
Okay, and so for the people out there that are hearing what you're saying and they're saying, okay, I've just been dealt this less than desirable situation. I'm experiencing emotions about it right now, and after I've had some time to experience those emotions, now I have to decide how I'm going to deal with it. How am I going to deal with my emotions, and how am I going to deal with this adverse situation? So for the how-to people out there, the people that you're saying, Danish, okay, give me some juice here. How can they pick themselves up and dust themselves off?
Okay, well, first of all, realize that those first two steps of, being with it, allowing it to be there, and sharing it with others in your life will cause it to go down. You won't be as emotionally wrapped up in it, and you won't be as held back by it. So the fear will actually subside a little bit already, so that will help you in the next step. And the next step is to appreciate it, is to move from this was something unwanted to this is something that could be beneficial. Find ways of looking at it where you can see the value in it, where you can see how it can make a difference. And it might not be today or next week, maybe it's 5 years from now. Maybe you have to see your life from a broader perspective. But now have thoughts and conversations around it being an experience that you spiritually chose, as opposed to an experience that you hated and didn't want. See, and the important thing about, I used to be, and I still am, a how-to person. I grew up as a techie. I was in technology, and I had a .com, and that's another part of my biography we didn't even talk about, the U.S. patent in biotechnology. And so I understand the how-to people, and what I want to say to that is, you can't go to step 3 easily if you don't do step 1 and 2. Sometimes the how-tos look at, 1 and 2 are so like, oh yeah, I got to experience it myself, I got to think about it, I have to talk to someone about it. It doesn't sound like a practical thing. And even 3 is like, oh, well now I got to change my thoughts. I understand, the how-tos understand it because it's a shift. But you can't get to that shift. Your mind and your emotions will resist that shift until you've done 1 and 2. And that's a challenge. We how-to people, and I used to do this. I used to try jumping to number 3. I said, let me just change my thoughts right now. And your body will resist it. It won't, I mean, in some cases it might be possible, but it'll definitely be much more difficult. Right. Because what you're doing is you're not getting to the source of why the emotions came up in the first place.
And there you come back to a word that's been made very popular, and that is process. Mm-hmm. Even Bob, I think I mentioned this in one of my other interviews, but Bob Proctor in The Secret Science of Getting Rich said rich people don't get rich by doing certain things. They get rich by doing certain things a certain way. Mm-hmm. And whether you're talking about making money, whether you're talking about HR development in a corporation, or whether you're talking about life and dealing with your emotions and adversity, everything always comes back to process. You can never, there are no shortcuts. You can never jump from point A to C to D and back to B again.
I've tried.
You've tried. And it didn't work.
No.
What is this new genre of yours called inspirational entertainment?
Well, as I was doing all these personal development courses and trying to share with my community, and I distilled it down to this philosophy around ordinary words, I still found that the mediums I was using to communicate were the traditional mediums of speaking and writing a book, and I found in those mediums people were already into it. They were already somewhat positive or open-minded or interested in personal development, but there was also all these people who were not coming to my seminars or not reading my book, who thought the industry was a scam, who thought it was all about positive thinking, and who were very skeptical, and those were the people I wanted to reach. I wanted to reach people who didn't think their life could be turned around, who thought their adversity and their circumstances were it, and there was no transformation possible. They didn't even understand what transformation was. It wasn't in their vocabulary, and those were who I wanted to get access to. So I thought to myself, how can I get access to them? And I realized that society in general, because of the media or whatever, has this resistance to motivation or personal development. And so I realized that my marketing had to come from a different angle. And what I started doing was producing entertainment, producing movies about love, and I had a live musical with singing and dancing and improv and theatrics, spoken word, slam poetry, beatboxing, multimedia, and it was all about a man who discovers his life by discovering what he likes and what he doesn't like. But the beauty of it was that it was promoted as entertainment because it was top quality entertainment. It was, Broadway-style performers and, top-notch singers who toured with Miss Saigon and then turned into a party, so it created this, fun social community atmosphere. And it didn't, and at that point, the motivation and the transformation was all under the covers. And so people got the enthusiasm of living the life of their dreams without it being marketed to them that way. And I think that's what is really working in our society. And I see that popping up all over the place, that now personal development is becoming a sub-genre of so many other things. And we see that, let's say, in Hollywood with a whole new surge of movies like What the Bleep and The Secret and Pass It On, and there's there's hundreds of movies like that, The Moses Code. And this was a genre that people 5 years ago said would never happen, and people 10 years ago, when I was starting it off, didn't even understand it. They didn't get that a genre like this would be possible. And this is what's really inspiring for me on a global level, because it really shows that our world is ready for that critical mass of transcendence. I mean, there's so many problems we hear about the world, and we know that the world has a lot of infrastructure that could be improved, and we don't even know how to improve some of it based on the politics and the government and the economic systems. But we also have this awakening that's happening in humanity, that more and more souls are being opened up to a completely new way of thinking that's having them live lives that were undescribable or unconscionable before. And so now we have a whole new paradigm of existence coming forth. It's really very exciting.
The world is receptive to it, you're saying.
It's becoming receptive to it now, yes.
Yeah, because I know you've been traveling an awful lot trying to follow that passion and build that awareness. Mm-hmm. You were recently in L.A., you said, and you told me you've been all over the place.
Yeah, Pakistan, and I'm off to Calgary and Kenya, and it's beautiful. I love to travel because it really gives me two things. One, a much more broader perspective of existence. I think so many times in life we get into our box of what life is like because that's our life. And we don't realize, we intellectually get that there might be people with very different lives, but until you experience a week with no water and no electricity, do you get what other people's lives are like in the world. In fact, more people than not. And it's very, very powerful. And the second thing is also not just based on circumstances, but also based on culture, on the way people interact and the way they think and their perspectives. Is you really see how possible it is to consistently think in a different way, and that opens up new awareness in ourselves that, hey, my thoughts don't have to be 95% the same that they were yesterday. And if only I can even change it from 95% the same to 90% the same, what could happen in my life?
Right. Well, there's been many studies out there, and one quote that I've said recently, I heard it from Wayne Dyer, who said, we have 60,000 some odd thoughts a day, and the problem is very often we'll have the same 60,000 a day than we did yesterday. And you're right, if you just change 5% of that, there's so much potential for change.
And traveling does that. Traveling gives you the opportunity to have a lot of different thoughts.
And recently you had told me that you're planning on changing the world. Is that how you're planning to do it, or is there more to your plan?
Oh, there's always more to my plan. It takes a lot. And
so how are you planning to change the world?
Well, in our society, we need an infrastructure based on the way our society works. Like, I'm sure a lot of people watch this movie called Pay It Forward, and there's such a profound and simple concept of giving random acts of kindness to people and asking them, instead of returning the favor, to pay it forward, to gift that kind of actness to 3 other people. And what you have is you have everybody giving kindness to everybody else, and you end up with this great utopia. And I saw the movie where this kid in grade 6 had the idea, and the movie was all about that. I walked out of the theater thinking the whole world was going to be changed.
Wow.
And on some levels, it was. There was a consciousness and an escrow of thought that a lot of people like me got from the movie that are now developing ways to have that manifest more. And I think what has that manifest more in the world is an infrastructure. If people have a way that they can know their their kindness is tracked, they're more likely to do it. Now, it seems kind of funny, and we know that at the same time, we want kindness to be anonymous, and we want it to be, not really tracked in an ideal world. But we are in the world that we live, and when things are tracked and when they're measured, people feel a lot better about them. And so one of the infrastructures that I'm setting up with an organization called Humanity Unites Brilliance is an infrastructure where we provide humanitarian aid, and we enroll other people to doing the same thing, and we track all of that. We track all of that, so every time you go to your website, you can see that you are indirectly responsible for 500 kids being fed this month in these different countries, and this is the impact that you had because you told someone who told someone who told someone, and now that person, because they're donating X amount of dollars, this is the impact that you were responsible for that would not have happened if it wasn't for your communication and your self-expression to this person.
Wow.
So that gives people a sense of, wow, this thing really, it's not just an idea, it's an idea that's working. And I think that what happens is it gives people the confidence to say, okay, let me do it. Because I think sometimes people give an act of kindness and then they don't know what happens to that. They don't know that a life has been changed. They don't know that they might have saved a life, or that they, the impact that they have. And we live in a society where,
we live in a society where seeing is believing, and if you don't see the results, you can't comprehend or don't really realize what they've done.
Exactly.
And if they haven't seen anything done forward and they haven't received anything back in return, they assume that the act of kindness was done to no avail.
Exactly.
And that's going well for you?
Oh, it's going phenomenally. Yeah, we're actually just opened up in 29 more countries all across Europe.
So you are going across the world?
Yeah, so we are. Well, I figured if we're about changing the world, we better be in more than 2 countries.
Good for you. Good for you. Tell us about, you have a book that you wrote, and also on your website is an e-book. Are they one and the same, or do you have two different books that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, they're the same book. One's an e-book version, and one's a paperback copy that you can get in stores across Canada and the States.
What is that book about?
It's about words. It's about communication, and because, like I said earlier, I feel that the foundation of all transformation is effective communication. So this book is all around the words that we use interchangeably, words that we commingle and that we think are synonyms. I think too many people use a thesaurus thinking that the words they're looking at are completely interchangeable. But it's not true, because if they were completely interchangeable, there would be no need for those words. And what's so beautiful, especially about the English language, I thought actually it was particularly true because of English, because it's taken from so many languages, but I realized in my research that it's actually true with a lot of languages. And it's because most languages are taken from other languages. Right. And what happens is that as language develops, more words are introduced to give more of a context, more depth, more connotation, more cultural influence on the subtleties around the new word. So the new word, we might think it's the same word as another word in that language, but over time, because of the way it's used in the media and because of the way people tend to use it differently than the original word, now we have two words that have different feelings related to them. And when they have different feelings related to them, they have a different impact when we use them to communicate. So what my book does, and I never liked to read because I was blind. I only actually read 2 books in my life, cover to cover. So I deliberately wrote the book in a way that worked for me. And I know it kind of works for other people with busy lives as well, is that every chapter is 2 pages. And in that 2 pages, I take 2 or 3 or 4 words that people use interchangeably, like dream, purpose, and mission, or should and could, or powerful, influential, and words like that. And through a story and life examples, in those 2 pages, talk about how switching them up, how using the words differently, using this word instead of that word, what they mean, and the difference they have in our communication effectiveness with people.
So changing the words and changing their meaning can in fact help people deal with adversity, among many other things.
Big time. And let me give you an example. There's a really powerful example I got actually when I was traveling across Australia in a workshop I did. As the leader talked about the difference between the words should and could. And inside of relationship, I found that this made a world of difference. So in relationships, people sometimes feel that the other person is lacking in some way, and they'll say something like, well, you should pay more attention to me, or you shouldn't be late.
Right.
And what that should hold is an obligation, and it holds a connotation of making the other person wrong.
Right.
Now, you could accomplish the same self-expression of your emotions by using the word could. You could pay more attention. And you could be more punctual. And what that does is now, instead of having a connotation of obligation, it has a connotation of possibility.
And empowerment itself.
And empowerment. It empowers the other person to want to, as opposed to feeling bad or wrong that they haven't. It's future-based as opposed to past-based.
Wow.
And it's just one word. In fact, it's just one or 2 letters. and it has such a different emotional impact.
Right. And yet here's another one that I read somewhere in one of the articles you've written. And when it comes to dealing with adversity, and as I said before, sometimes we just have to pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off. You have to make a choice about how you're going to move forward. And you talked somewhere about the difference between making a choice and making a decision. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. And in these distinctions, what I want to emphasize is it's not about one word being better than the other. It's about the 2 words are different.
Right.
And so it isn't, even if sometimes I'll say an example and people might interpret that, I should always use the word decide, not use the word should, or not use the word choose. Right. And no, different. The whole point is to give you a different contextual flavor, so you have more choice in the words that you choose. So inside of decide and choosing, what I've learned is that decide is more around logic. It's more around reasons. It's more around business. So, we decide to do things because they make sense. Choice is more from an energy, emotional, spiritual place. There's no logic around our choices. And so in different circumstances, we want to make decisions, like in business, and in different circumstances, we want to make choices, like in relationships. Seldom do we go into a relationship because there's 25 good points about the other person as opposed to 3 bad points. That's not a decision. That's more of a, we choose because we're attracted and compelled, and we choose despite what everyone else says, and despite the statistics, and despite what we think is normal, we choose to be in that relationship.
Right.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful.
And in terms of, again, coming back to overcoming adversity, though, and something you talked about earlier in the call, which is emotions and fear. One of the things you had said is, I'll give you an example or a couple examples of choice versus decision. You said the choice is the plan, the decision is the program, the choice is the dream, the decision is the action. Now you take it one step further, and I think this hits the ball out of the park, so to speak, and that is, with a choice comes possibility, but with a decision comes commitment. Now, if we're dealt an adverse situation and we have to figure out how we're moving forward, very often, because, as we said before, society raises us to be fearful of pain, fearful of what other people think, fearful of what other people judge us, how they judge us. When we proceed from a position of choice, i.e. possibility, as you said, we're kind of giving ourselves a way out if we choose to change path along the way. Versus if you look at any successful person, they've made a decision, which is a commitment, to use your words. And when you're committed and you've made a decision, you're not going to change path just because somebody didn't agree with you or somebody judged you. You don't let fear and emotion get in the way. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, there's lots of subtleties to these generalizations because, and then that's why people have weekend workshops on them, and we can talk about choice and decision for months because, that's talking about the foundation of life.
Right.
And and sometimes when we, generalize, we can't cover every fine point. So you're right in that with decision comes commitment, and there's many people in their lives who have been committed to a cause that kept them on that cause. Now, I think when we look at it in more detail, we will see, though, that what they realized along the way was what they thought their end decision was didn't manifest exactly that way, that they were flexible because they realized their decision or the commitment for the future was a little, had to be shaped. They had to be flexible, and they had to get to the source of what was their ultimate desire and mission. They had to get to the source of their mission in order to manipulate and mold and choose the circumstances of their life to get the decision of the future.
Right.
So it's another way to look at it. I would assert is that we want to decide and commit to the future we want, and before we do that, we've got to choose the present that we have. And what happens a lot of the times is people try to not choose the present, and I did that for a while. I so didn't like my present, and I wanted this future. And it doesn't matter how committed I am to my future until I accept my present. And so the decision will never manifest until because you can't change your present circumstances, and most people try to decision their way out of their present circumstances. Right. They try to make their present circumstances wrong and say this shouldn't have been, or why is this the way it is? And the power in choice is not that there's any reason. It doesn't matter what the reason is of our present life circumstances. What matters is that they are. And as soon as I choose that this is what they are, now I can decide on a future. But I can't decide on a future if I resist what is, because if I resist what is, it will just persist.
Danish, have you ever wondered why two people coming from a similar background and similar abilities can move along the highway of life facing similar sorts of adversity, and one remains balanced and optimistic and the other complains, assigns blame, and falls apart?
Because their inner worlds are different. The way they're thinking is different.
Thinking, okay. So can you elaborate on that? Like, how would their thinking... We talked about how emotions drive people. So they've dealt with the emotion. Now they're at step 2, which is the thought. What types of thoughts... Because I think this will help listeners if they're dealing with adversity. What types of thoughts would the person that remains balanced and optimistic have versus the other types of thoughts that the person that remains in a state of blame and falls apart is having?
Right. So there's lots of different ways we can categorize the two distinctions, the two ways of thinking. One way is to say that the person who is feeling trapped and complaining is because they're looking for that. They're looking for what's wrong. They're not accepting their circumstances. They're feeling that the circumstances they have are unfair. The person who is optimistic is looking for what's right. Is looking for what is working, and is and being grateful and showing gratitude and appreciation for what they have. And you know, if I know some people, especially who are very logical, think to themselves, well, I have nothing. And you know, no matter where you are in the world, the one thing that you always have is your breath. I mean, that is your life. Mm-hmm. And so some people go back to that. So, you know, whatever circumstances I may have, I'm breathing. I'm conscious of the fact that I'm breathing means that it's a beautiful day. And it might sound weird for some people, but that's, you know, what happens in concentration camps. That's what happens with prisoners of war. How did they get through, you know, 10 years of torture? I mean, their circumstances are so much more difficult than, you know, us not having, you know, some discretionary income that we like. It's, you know, it's what a world of difference. And it hasn't to do with the circumstances. It has to do with the discipline of thought.
Right.
And discipline, I think, is another key word there, because it's not like those categories are mutually exclusive. It's a tendency. It's like, it doesn't mean that the positive person has to think positive 100% of the time and the negative person thinks 100, because when you're trying to shift, you're not going to switch from 100 to 0. It's going to be very gradual. And especially at the beginning, all you're doing is just catching yourself. You're not even trying to change your thoughts. You're just saying, oh, I noticed another negative one. Oh, I noticed another negative one. Oh, I noticed another negative one. And right. Just out of that habit of noticing, do you cause transformation?
Right.
Just notice. So the first thing is to notice the thoughts that you're having. Just pay attention to them. Not try to suppress them or say go away or they're bad. Just notice what they are. And sometimes noticing what they are gives you the power to say, well, maybe I can change it. Maybe I can have a different perspective.
Right. Yeah, and that reminds me of a story, again, from Byron Katie, who did consulting work at San Quentin, the prison, and she was walking down one of the cell blocks and heard one of the inmates, a very large and dangerous man, if you will, when he was out in the streets. He was screaming and crying at the top of his lungs, and he was alone in there. No one was beating him up. No one was punishing him. He was alone, and she described it. The problem was he was alone with his thoughts. It was what he was thinking about, and that caused him to screech and scream and yell and cry. And she said, if you would open up that cell door and take him out and put in a Buddhist monk, he'd say thank you, because he's alone with his thoughts.
Oh my God!
And that was a true story, apparently. Well, she didn't put in the Buddhist monk, but she saw this prisoner screaming. And it all comes down to when you can be locked up in a jail cell, or you can be living life in the world, regardless of what country you're in and what circumstances you're in. And it all comes down to your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I heard a speaker say once, the most important thing than anything else in your life is the way you think, because the way you think is what controls your life.
Right. Well, it's been a very exciting conversation, to say the least.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add in terms of helping people overcome adversity?
Well, yeah, I think we can talk more about the faith element, because in our society there's a stigma about religion, which I think is appropriate, but at the same time keeps us away from, I think, really talking about spirituality. And a lot of the
you're talking spirituality not from a sense as a religious preacher, but spirituality in terms of the spirit inside of you.
Yeah, because that's a really, really important thing about life. Mm-hmm. When we lose the consciousness of that spirit, we lose meaning and purpose, and that's why we have a society that's very dysfunctional. Is because it's not been present to spirit for a very long time.
We've been raised and taught to follow the herd, and that is follow the herd of what is acceptable and what should we think and what should we say and how should we judge others, versus how should we look inside and understand our emotions and choose our thoughts.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying?
Yeah. And when we look at the world from we can say the spiritual perspective or from the eyes of the spirit, it's easier to see more from a bird's eye view. It's easier to be a lot more broad in our perspective. It's easy to see our whole life as our whole life, as opposed to this particular moment in my life being so frustrating. Because when we look at it from spirit, then what we see is a much bigger universe. What we see, maybe what's possible for us to see, is that our life circumstances were maybe that they were chosen by spirit.
Right.
A lot of the adversities I have in my life, I hated when I was growing up. I was like, this is unfair. Why do I have this? And it makes my life more difficult. And then as I looked at things that I was benefiting in my life because I had those adversities, I started thinking to myself, maybe from a spiritual perspective, I chose those adversities. Maybe from a spiritual perspective, I chose to be an albino. Maybe from a spiritual perspective, my spirit decided that I wanted to have limited sight so that I could experience the life experiences that I'm having. And I heard Tony Robbins said a while ago, he said that, it doesn't matter whether what we believe is true or not. Our society also has this attachment to truth. When truth changes every 2 weeks on the news anyways. But yet people think that they need to know the truth. And Tony Robbins said something very powerful. He said, it doesn't matter whether something's true or not. What matters is whether it empowers you or not.
Right.
And so, we can study religion and philosophies and spirituality and metaphysics for 25 years to come to a conclusion on whether that is true or not, whether we spiritually chose our bodies. But the question is, does that belief make you feel good? And if it does, believe it.
Right.
Because it's going to make you have a better life.
Right.
And if it doesn't, and if that doesn't work for you, then don't use it. But seriously try it on. Don't just say it doesn't work because you don't want anything to work for you, because you may be in this place that you just believe that nothing will work because you want to stay in that place. But to seriously consider it, when trying it on like a jacket, it means to embrace it not for 2 minutes, but try it on for a day or 5 days or some amount of time that you're conscious of.
Right.
It's like another thing that I learned from Tony Robbins is that most people are not positive thinking doesn't work for them because they try it for 10 minutes. It's like it's not something, you don't go to the gym for 10 minutes and then say, working out doesn't work.
Right.
It has to become a lifestyle. It has to become a habit. And when
we're creatures of habit, and you have to make it a habit.
Yeah. So, and at the same time, I think, life is also about a balance, the yin-yang. Just like we're not meant to be happy all the time, it's also good to realize that we do live in the physical world. I love this great quote from Wayne Dyer. He says, I think it's from Wayne Dyer, he says, we are not human beings who have a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings who have a human experience.
Right.
And
he said that many times.
Yeah, so that, again, is looking at our life challenges from the viewpoint of spirit. Is saying, listen, we don't have this life challenge because it's a life challenge, but let's look at it from a spiritual challenge. And when we look at it from a spiritual challenge, all of a sudden our context may shift. Mm-hmm. Now, at the same time, to provide yin and yang to that, I always say, but also be conscious of the world we live in. We do live in a physical world. And we do live in a society that's very visually oriented and that's very material. And good, wrong, or indifferent, that's the way it is. So I don't want to necessarily spend 24 hours a day just blissing out, because then my furniture is going to be taken away from me.
Right. Right.
It's all a balance and being conscious of the both extremes and not going to any particular extreme.
Right.
And not necessarily staying in the middle 100% of the time either, that life is about discovery, and it's okay that I'm leaning 80% towards this way right now because that's the phase of my life that I'm in. The whole seed of transformation is not changing behavior, it's becoming conscious of behavior, and then having the choice to change it if you want, not that you have to.
Right. And you said something before. You referred back to some of the situations in your life that were not ideal at the time, for lack of a better description. And so hindsight, of course, is always 20/20. But one of the things that I've heard and I've tried is when you're dealing with adversity, one way to choose your thoughts and to help control your feelings is to think to separate yourself from the situation for a moment and say, in 20 years, in 40 years, what will I look back and think about this? Mm-hmm. Now, there's been some situations in my personal life where at the time I could have done some terrible things to some people that I thought were really, really hurting me in certain ways, in business and in my job and in life. Now I look back and it doesn't matter. Mm. And they say time heals all wounds, and that's easy to say, but the reality is back then, if I had said, 20 years from now, will I even care? Yeah. And if the answer is no, not really, or can I take this bad situation and turn it into something good in the future? Can I learn from it? Maybe not now, but maybe in the future. It lets you shed light on a current situation in a whole different way. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's another idea for dealing with adversity, and that is to separate yourself and think, in 20 years from now, how will I look back on this? Will it really be as bad then as it is now? Yeah.
And another paradigm, just to give your listeners some more variety, more options, is humor. Some people say, some people realize that one day they'll look back on a situation and laugh at it. And why not look at it right now and laugh at it?
Right.
Find the humor in your adversity.
Yeah, that was humorous in itself. Yeah. One day I'll look back and laugh. Why not laugh now? I like that. I like that. Very good. Well, Danish.
Another way to look at emotions, and I got this from, I think, Abraham Hicks, which is another really powerful way to distinguish our perspective and our emotions, is to realize it's the same emotion. That whether we're feeling depressed or whether we're feeling totally euphoric, mm-hmm. The intensity is the source energy that is coming up inside of us, being expressed. The actual emotion of whether it's depression or whether it's euphoria is an interpretation of us.
Right.
So we get the intensity of emotion, whatever it is, and we interpret it. And so depression is an interpretation. Euphoria is an interpretation. Anger is an interpretation.
And for that matter, emotions are an mm-hmm. interpretation.
Yeah.
Emotions are only subject to the meaning we give to them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what.
It's like being analogous to color. It's like we have in life we have all these colors: blue, green, red, brown, black. Now we don't go around saying, gray. That's not a good color. Blue. Right. We might have preferences,
right.
But we shouldn't blacklist certain colors and say, well, such other colors are the bomb, and we want those, and we want the world to have that color. Well, different people like different colors, and different colors work for different people, and all colors are used to create beautiful pictures, and and all emotions are used to create life.
And the other thing Wayne Dyer talks about is everything in this world has a polar opposite. You can't have black and white without color. You can't have color without black and white. You can't have good without bad.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have good without adversity. And for every situation in your life that you might be experiencing some sort of adversity, there's another situation that can occur now or will occur that's an opposite, because you have to have opposites. And you get to choose your thoughts, whether or not you're going to dwell on the adversity or strive for and seek the polar opposite.
Yeah, my favorite quote is that for every profound truth, the opposite is usually another profound truth.
Yes, and there are, I don't know how many, I'm going to guess hundreds, if not thousands, of amazing quotes on your website.
Yeah.
Which I encourage people to. Every time I read them, I start thinking about them, and they keep changing.
Yeah, we should tell them the website, ordinarywords.com.
We are going to. We're going to. In fact, if our listeners would like more information about anything we've talked about today, whether it's overcoming adversity or whether it's all of the fun and exciting things that you've talked about, Danish, they can either go to www.ordinarywords.com, that's one word, or they can go to ultimatehappinessandsuccess.com, and all of the information is there for them. If they'd like more information about everything we've talked about today and then some, they should check out on the website ultimatehappinessandsuccess.com our live break-free event. We have one coming up in Toronto, one coming up in San Antonio, Texas, and we'll have new events scheduled all the time where we're going to talk about adversity, we're going to talk about emotions, we're going to talk about fear, we're going to talk about health, and we're going to talk about powerful words and everything else that can help and inspire people to get exactly where they want to go in life.
Awesome. I love how you framed that our talk about adversity was fun and exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all the meaning you give to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Danish, it's been an honor and a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always wonderful being self-expressed to an audience who really wants a higher level of consciousness and transformation in life.
I know, isn't it great?
Mm-hmm.
And both, Danish, I know I speak for yourself and myself when I say we're both very grateful that all our valued listeners took the time from their busy day to listen to this recording and allow us into their lives with some of the ideas we've shared. If there's any part of your life that listeners that you would like to gain more clarity, understanding, or make positive changes to, feel free to give us a call or contact us by email at info@ultimatehappinessandsuccess.com, or telephone. You can call toll free at 1-888-884-0051. If you would like contact information for Danish, you can either ask us for that or go directly to his website at www.ordinarywords.com.
Or Facebook me and poke me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on adversity or anything else in life. I love connecting with people, so get me on Facebook, Danish, D-A-N-I-S-H, Ahmed, A-H-M-E-D.
Perfect. Go on Facebook. Facebook is growing by the day, I hear. I think they just set another record this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's going to be the new paradigm of technology.
So there you go. Now Danish is on Facebook, as am I. So Facebook them, poke them, and let's change the world together, shall we?
Yes, I love it.
Great.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Danish, and to your happiness and success, everybody. I'm Michael Schuster.